Hello my friends, and welcome to day 4 of the Lumberjack sew along. Today we're working on the cuffs. So today we're only taking care of the sleeve cuffs, whether they're woven like I'm doing or the knit ones. The knit cuffs are very easy. You're going to add them just like you do any t-shirt by just using a knit with a good stretch and good recovery like cotton spandex. Or you can use the woven one, which is the one I'm going to do right now. Before we start, we need to do 2 slits in this cut here right now. So remember, we did the cut when we cut the fabric on day 1. So right now, right here, I'm going to do 2 slits on the diagonal, so it looks like a Y on both cuffs. I'm going to work on one of the sleeves and then of course repeat the same steps on the other one off camera, because there's no need to do it twice. Okay, so we're gonna do this. Now take your binding that's cut on the bias. I went ahead and pre-pressed it wrong sides together along the middle, so I have it's about 2 inches, so it's 1 inch on each side. And I'm going to open this up and pin the binding right sides together. The binding piece may be a little longer, and that's okay, it's on purpose. We'll remove any excess. It's just so there's a little wiggle room. And we're going to pin it like so. Having cut that triangle over there, that Y part, will help us when we sew, so it doesn't pucker. Okay, so this is what it looks like pinned. You can see the little Y's there, and we're going to stitch this down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It will get you very close to those slits you just did. But they are still on the side of the seam allowance. So this is what your binding looks like once we've made the first stitch. See that little V here. So now we're going to fold it over. So the memory hem we did earlier will be right where the raw edge is, right here. We're going to fold the raw edge of the binding 1/2 inch. You can press it if you want. And then we're going to refold it over that. So now the raw edges are fully enclosed. And put a couple of pins. It is totally okay to have excess binding on both sides. We'll trim that off. So let's stitch this down through all 4 layers. And this will also top stitch this binding part on the other side. Beautiful. This is a very simple way of doing a placket. So let me remove the excess from both sides, so the raw edge of the sleeve matches the binding here. Okay. So now, with the wrong side of the sleeve out, okay, we want to come here and matching this edge of the cuff we want to stitch a diagonal line like so here. So let me keep this together. Okay, so you want to do a diagonal line right here. Go slow because there's a lot of bulk there. And of course, repeat the same step on the other sleeve. So now I'm going to turn it right side out again. So see how nicely it stays here in the cuff. And I'm going to work on the actual cuff. So you should have one piece that is interfaced for the lining and one piece of the fabric that is not interfaced for the main. Oh, before I do this, if you're doing the lined version, you will be treating right now the piece that you have with the lining and the main as one piece. So everything that I'm doing on this, imagine that yours is just one piece. Only it has the lining and main wrong sides together. Okay? So the cuffs are added exactly the same way for the lined version too. Now let's grab this and place them right sides together, the cuff and the lining, and we're going to stitch. I also went ahead and pressed 1/2 inch on the bottom of the lining, and I'm going to stitch all around starting from where I folded here. Going to snip the corners, so this way when we turn it, it's nice and flat. Trim the corners like this. Turn your cuff right side out. Poke the corners out, and you can also give it a good press. Again, the interfaced part is the one that's the lining. If you've used different fabrics, it's easier to see, but I've used the same fabric for mine. Okay. I'll do a little finger press here at the seam because we will be top stitching it. So now, with the cuff sewn, like so, I'm going to take the sleeve, the one that has the binding, and I'm going to add the cuff all around, only pinning the main part. So just the main part with the 1/2 inch folded here. So I'm going to come all around. And you are pinning two straight edges, almost straight edges, so it should be relatively easy. Obviously there is no stretching anything. And I'm only pinning the right sides together, the main of the cuff and the sleeve, not the lining. The lining is separate. Let me show you a close-up. what I mean. Okay, so I did a little zooming so you can see before we start stitching. And I started from the back of the sleeve by aligning these raw edges, okay? I've aligned this raw edge of the binding with the cuff. Pinned just the main, went all the way around with my pins. And when you get to the front of the sleeve, make sure that you're pinning it with the binding folded. Okay, so this is your binding. You don't go all the way here. You fold this binding under and you pin it like so here. And this is a 1-to-1 ratio, so you'll see that there's no stretching or anything. Okay, so this is folded under and this is lined right sides together. My seam allowance is still folded here. Okay, so now we're going to stitch this down using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Let's see if I can do a free arm for this. Not all the sleeves fit in my free arm, but this is a size 12, so I think it does fit. Okay, so we're placing this down, and with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch all around. Only, like I said, only through the main and the sleeve. So only 2 layers of fabric you should have here, no more. Here again, make sure it stays folded under. Yeah, I don't think any smaller than size 12 would have worked with the free arm. Backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and it should look something like this. See, the cuff itself, it's not attached yet, only 2 layers are sewn together. So now we're going to turn, let's turn the sleeve and work from the wrong side, because it might be a little easier. Okay, so now this seam allowance that we just did will be put in the cuff. So we're going to stitch all around the lining of the cuff now, that will create a top stitching on the front and will also enclose this seam allowance. So I'm going to use a couple of pins, because you can't really use clips for this step, just to stitch them, just to hold them in place a little bit. Again, they're 1-to-1 ratio, so there is no issue whatsoever, but just an additional help. Again, the seam allowance goes in the cuff like so, and the cuff covers the raw edge. Okay, all around. Okay. It's been so long since I've used actual pins. Alright, so now you decide if you want to stitch from the lining part or from the main, but you're going to stitch a rectangle all around the cuff. This will top stitch all the edges and will also enclose this seam. So let's start with this side. I'm going to increase my stitch length to a 3.5 for top stitching. And then go all around. So you're stitching a rectangle right now. Remove your pins as you go. I am not a stitch over pins kind of a girl. The last thing I need is a broken needle, broken pin in my retina. No, I remove them as I go. Okay, when you get to the edge, just pivot and go around. Then at the corner again pivot and go all around. Okay, and last. And stitch down, and that is it. You have finished your cuffs. Of course, we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. But for now, this side is done. Trim all your threads so you don't forget. At least that's me. I like to trim as I go my threads because I forget at the end of the project. I'm too excited that it's done and I forget. So there you have it. Your cuff is done. So this is what it looks like. On this side it goes underneath here, and this is going to be getting some snaps or some buttons later on, okay? That will overlap right here. So this is the cuff done. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Also, I forgot to mention, and I didn't do it, but I'll do it on the other side. Trim your seam allowance to 1/4 inch when you sew right sides together. I'm feeling it now that's 1/2 inch, so I didn't snip it. So trim your seam allowance when you sew the cuff pieces right side together. But other than that, you should be all done. Snap a picture of your pretty cuffs, whether they're woven or knit, and post it in the photo 4 comments of the Sew Along album. That's on Facebook. That's your check-in for day 4, and I'll see you back here tomorrow when we'll be sewing the collar or adding the hood, depending on which style you've opted for. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye!